Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to talk for a little bit about Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves. If you've been keeping up with the NBA at all this season or been watching the channel, which if you have, definitely appreciate that, you'll know that the Wolves are in the midst of one of the best seasons in franchise history. At the moment, they're 47-22 with 13 games left to play, the third seed in the Western Conference, and just one game out of the one seed. And if you check the standings most days of this NBA calendar year, you'll have seen that the Wolves were at the top of the Western Conference. They've held down that one spot remarkably well for a lot of the season. They have had a lot of competitors, the Thunder have held it for some points, the Nuggets and the Clippers, but again, most days, it's been the Wolves as the kings of the West, and this is something that not a lot of people expected coming into the season. Last year, I was a big believer in the Minnesota Timberwolves. I pegged them as the second seed in the Western Conference, which a lot of people clowned me for, and it ended up being a bit too premature because they had a big injury with Cat. They really never put things together last season, ended up being a playoff team making it through the play-in. But this year, the vision has come to fruition. The Rudy Gobert-Cat thing is working. Anthony Edwards has been amazing. The supporting cast has held up. Chris Finch has done a pretty good job. And the Wolves have been consistently one of the best teams in the NBA. And this has built up a lot of hype. People discussing, is this the year the Wolves finally go ahead and make the NBA Finals and potentially win it? Where does this team rank again in the hierarchy of all-time Wolves teams? It's definitely up there. And people discussing what they can be in the future. It's been really fun to follow the Timberwolves throughout the season. They've been one of the most fun stories in the entire NBA. But some of that hype came to a bit of a screeching halt on March 4th when Karl-Anthony Towns tore his meniscus against the Blazers. Thankfully, this isn't an injury that's supposed to keep him out for the rest of the NBA season, but it could lead up right until the playoffs. There are some reports that he may not be back until the beginning of the playoffs. It's pretty concerning because for a majority of the year, Cat's been one of their most stable guys. There were some trade rumors surrounding him in the offseason, but Cat bounced back in a big way, has been an all-star, and was making a bit of an all-NBA case. 22 points per game, 8 boards, 3 assists on near 50, 40, 90 was huge for their offense, which has been the part that they've struggled more so over the course of the season. The defense has been runaway number one for pretty much the entire year, but offensively they've been hovering right around the 20s. Cat has been a saving grace for them on that end, and losing him was huge in their pursuit for the one seed, huge in their pursuit of trying to make it far into the playoffs, because even when Cat does return, is he going to be 100%? Is he going to be the Cat that we saw for a majority of the year? So it quickly became, concerning. The Wolves season was suddenly in question. So to stay in the fight for the one seed, to make it into the playoffs on a hot streak, or at least keep a bit of the momentum, they're going to need a lot of guys to step up, and most of the focus landed on Anthony Edwards. Ever since he got drafted a few years ago, Anthony Edwards has rapidly become the face of this franchise. When people talk about the Timberwolves, most of the focus is on Anthony Edwards, and it makes a lot of sense. This season, he's been their leading scorer, their go-to guy in the clutch and improved defender, a special athlete who creates some of the most ridiculous highlights you will ever see. He's been doing everything for them over the past few years, and if there's going to be a way that the Wolves make it to the finals, win the finals over the next few seasons, it's going to have to be Ant who leads them there. He is the future, the key to this team going forward. So this season coming into things, it felt like Ant was going to have to take a bit of a jump to take the Wolves to the next level, and credit to him, he has done that. He made his second All-Star game this year after being one last season, but now he's in a bit more of all NBA talks. However, it hasn't been the jump that some people were expecting. I know some people were thinking he could be a top 10 or 15 player after this season. He didn't quite reach those talks, at least not until very recently, because since Karl-Anthony Towns went down, Ant has been unbelievably special. Over the 7 games since Cat got injured, Ant has been putting up 31.1 points per game, 7.3 rebounds, and 5.4 assists to go with 1.7 steals and 1.4 blocks, while shooting 48% from the field and playing a ridiculous 38.3 minutes per game. They are running him into the ground. They're relying on him so heavily in these games to give them pretty much all their offense, to play make, to rebound. Like I said, 7 rebounds. He's grabbing over a steal and block per game, so they're asking a lot of him defensively too. And has had to do everything for this team, which he's been doing over the course of the year, but now he really is almost their sole offensive player with Cat out of the picture, and he's found a way to be productive very, very frequently. Outside of a really rough 19-point game against Cleveland, he shot 50% or better in all 7 of these games, and his 5 30-point performances over this same stretch. Some of his highlight individual performances include a 44.6 rebound, 3 assist, 2 steal, 2 block game against Indiana, which finished with him pulling off one of the most insane chase down blocks I have ever seen. I don't know how he got so high. He hit his head on the rim. He fell to the ground, which for most players, a fall from that height looks like it would give them a serious injury that would put them out for weeks, and it just got up and laughed it off and was hype, he doesn't make any sense. The stuff that he's able to do on both ends because of the athleticism is part of why the ceiling is unbelievably high for Anthony Edwards. So plays like this are an example of the highlights that he's been making over the course of these 7 games and really over the course of his entire career. His current highlight reel is beyond players that have played for like 15 seasons. He's that special. He also had 37, 8, and 4 in a blowout win over the Clippers, who they're competing with for that 1 seed spot. And at the end of the game, he was purposely shooting bank shots just because he could, because they were blowing them out so bad. In a win over Utah, he had 31, 10, 5, 3, and 3, just 2 blocks and 2 steals away from a 5x5 as a guard. He had 32, 7, 8, 1, and 2 in another game against Utah, which, while we're speaking about athleticism, included one of the most impressive posters I've ever seen over John Collins, easily dunk of the year at this point. It was so bad that it gave John Collins a concussion, and Anthony Edwards afterwards was looking at his hand. I'm pretty sure he dislocated one of his fingers, went ahead, got it popped back in, and hopped right back in the game to compete at the highest level. We want to talk about that dog mentality where nothing really bothers him and he's going to continue to play at an unbelievable level. Anthony Edwards has that quality. And then last night against Denver, he had 30 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists with 2 steals in a really close loss on the road where he just barely missed a 3 at the buzzer that would have given them the win, but he did everything he could to get them to that point. That was a game where Kyle Anderson was out there playing center and guarding Nikola Jokic, and they still almost won in Denver. That's how great Ant was, and a lot of credit goes to a bunch of other guys on the Wolves too. But Ant was the reason they were, for the most part, in that game. He has done some special stuff. It's been a really difficult stretch of games. They very rarely played any bad teams. It's led them to a 4-3 record. That's a lot better than I would have thought they would have done over this stretch without Cat, as well as Gobert. Gobert hasn't played for the past 3 games. That's the 2 games against Utah, and then this most recent one against Denver. So he has found a way to keep them competitive, despite them missing their second and third best player. You can argue the order of these guys if you want to, but the other 2 guys in the big 3 haven't been playing, and they've still been finding ways to win, or at the very least stay really competitive against some of the best teams in the NBA. He's averaging the most points per game over the past 7 games, and even since February 1st, going way back before Cat even got hurt, he's putting up 29 points per game since that date, which is the 5th highest mark in the NBA. So regardless of Cat being there or not, Ant is playing some of the best basketball of his career right now. He's very rapidly rising to that superstar level that people are looking for from him going into the year. And he can do it in so many ways, whether it's knocking down outside shot, either catch and shoot or off the dribble. He's great at creating space, especially for pull-up mid-range jumpers. He's great at those. He's elite when attacking the basket, using that athleticism like we talked about with the John Collins dunk. You go back a few years ago to the Yuta Watanabe dunk. He just collects posters with the best of them. There are very few players I already think in league history that have a better poster collection than Anthony Edwards. There is really no spot on the court that he is not able to be really effective offensively. He is prone sometimes to a bit of streakiness, but when he's on, there are very few players that are as dangerous as Anthony Edwards on that offensive end. Not to mention the defensive end as well. Anthony Edwards has pretty often asked Chris Finch to let him guard the opposing team's best player. I know there's a number of times where he switched on to them, giving them a lot of problems down the stretch of games. And if we take a look at some advanced statistics such as EPM, which a lot of people say is one of the better advanced statistics for measuring these types of things, Ant is in the 90th percentile both offensively and defensively in the league, and that is a very exclusive club. There are not a lot of players who are as proficient on both sides of the ball as Ant is, according to this statistic, and even just with the eye test, you can see that he is a special player offensively and defensively. He's been one of the biggest reasons for why the Wolves have been so successful this season and continuously showcases this superstar potential. I feel very certain that you give it a couple years, Ant is going to be in the conversation for the top 5, 7 best players in the world, maybe even as soon as next year, if he continues to level up the way he has from season to season. It truly felt like the Wolves would very quickly fall out of any 1 seed contention with a Cat injury, but they're still fighting. They have a really tough schedule coming up. They play Denver 3 more times the rest of the season, so they're getting a lot out of Ant if they want to make any type of fight for it, but the fact that they're still finding ways to do so is highly impressive. And hey, with the way that Ant is playing, even though they do need Cat to make a deep playoff run, I think he could give one of those lower seeds hell himself in the playoffs, especially because if last season's playoffs are any indicator, he is a playoff riser. Against Denver last season, he put up 31.6 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 5.2 assists to go with 1.8 steals and 2 blocks while shooting 48.2% from the field, 35% from 3, and 85% from the line in that series. He gave them so many problems. There were a number of Nuggets players who said that out of all the players they had to play against in the playoffs, Anthony Edwards and the Timberwolves as a whole were one of the toughest matchups, perhaps the toughest matchup out of anybody. And if he has a similar level up in the playoffs this year with his improved game overall, it's going to be really scary for opposing Western Conference teams. And this is one of the reasons why I believe if Cat comes back and looks like himself, I do think the Wolves can come out of the Western Conference. There are some people who say that they don't see them as true title contenders, which if you don't, I do understand because their offense is a bit concerning. They have problems on the stretch of games when it comes to clutch time offense. There are reasons to be concerned with this Wolves team, but the way that Anthony Edwards elevates his game, the way that I've seen him take over in the stretch with Cat, makes me feel like he can really level up in the playoffs and get them to the next level. They've only been 18th offensively in the league. They're going to have to make that better. But if Ant's putting up numbers like he did against Denver over the course of a whole playoff run, they've got a chance to compete with anybody, especially in conjunction with the NBA's best defense anchored by the D-Point and Rudy Gobert. I think this team has way more potential than people are giving them credit for. I don't think they're frauds. They could lose in one of the earlier rounds because the West is so deep, but this team has a great chance to come out of the Western Conference. They've got a lot of talent, and Ant is quickly becoming the superstar that they need to take them to the eventual NBA championship if they want to get to that point. I would love to see a rematch between Denver and this Timberwolves team in the playoffs this season. Say we see them in like a second round matchup. I think that would be incredibly fun. They've had some really tough battles over the past couple of years. The Timberwolves have the size to really match up with the Nuggets, who are kind of the kings of that going into last year's playoffs. Anthony Edwards has given them problems at times. I think it would be an amazing series. I really want to see it. Perhaps the craziest part of this Anthony Edwards ascension is that he's still just 22 years old. He doesn't turn 23 until August of this year when the season is over. And he's putting up almost 27 points per game as a lockdown defender, the face of a franchise. He has very quickly been thrust into this role and has excelled in pretty much any way you could ask of him. The potential for him is otherworldly. He feels like he could be a future consistent all-defensive level defender while also giving you 27 to 30 points per game, maybe even beyond that, if he continues to really elevate his game. He's a walking highlight reel. He's going to be one of the faces of the league for pretty much his entire career, it feels like. Anthony Edwards is an ascending superstar. If you haven't already, buy stock in Anthony Edwards because he's very quickly going to rise up those top player rankings. If he has a great playoff run, like say the Wolves push their way to the Western Conference Finals or maybe even the NBA Finals, it's going to rely a lot on Anthony Edwards. So if they're making it that far, he's going to be considered pretty widely, I would imagine, going into next season as a top 10-ish player right around that realm. He's starting to get into conversations with some of the best young guards in the NBA, and it's deserved. Ant is a really, really special player. I love watching him. One of my favorite players to watch in the entire league, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. Again, just 22 years old. He's not even close to what most people consider a player's prime, which is right around that 27, 28-year-old mark. With all that being said, I think those are my thoughts on the Timberwolves and Anthony Edwards in specific. I really applaud him for the way he's been carrying this franchise in the absence of Cat. Really hope Cat can come back soon. I want to see this Wolves team fully healthy for a playoff run because I think they could prove a lot of people wrong, Anthony Edwards in particular. Let me know what you think about his game. How far do you think he can peak in the top player rankings when he gets to his prime? Do you think he can eventually be the best in the world? Do you think he can win some MVPs, be competing for all defensive teams? Do you think he could lead the Wolves to a finals appearance this season? And where do you think he can lead the Wolves down the line as he continues to get better and better and they continue to mold this team around him and his strengths? Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Let me know down below what players or teams you want to see me talk about in this home stretch of the season because I gotta be honest, I am low on topics to talk about the moment. We're kind of just waiting for the playoffs in this current setting. So I guess, we'll see what pops up as the NBA season continues on. But for right now, appreciate you watching. I'll see y'all later. Everyone, stay back.